Thank you for joining me for this webinar this morning. I'm going to be speaking to you today about open listening and what part it plays in the birthing awareness three-step process. Now, the key to open listening is observation and calibration. Now, these are the foundations of this healing journey we're on. This webinar will dive deeply into the concept and practice of open listening. But before we get there, for those of you that haven't been to the first in the series, I need to just give you a bit of an overview of the three-step process. Now, the three-step process involves 3 sessions. The first session, which is where the open listening takes place, as well as a relaxation script that you guide the client through. The second session is what I call the re-encoding session. That it speaks for itself, but there is another webinar coming up which dives deep into the re-encoding part of the process. And the third part of the process is called future pacing. Again, there's a lot to say about it, and I'll be covering that in a future webinar. It's important, before we move on, that you understand some of the fundamentals of the underlying model that the three-step process is based on. Now, the model views the physical signs and signals coming off your client as the endpoints of internal mental patterns. These internal patterns manifest outwardly through changes in things like muscle tone, breathing, complexion. When we're open listening, the important thing to understand is that we are observing these signs and signals without assigning any meaning. We're simply noting the external manifestations. This is important because through the process of listening, we are establishing a baseline for calibration. I'm pausing because I'm wondering how the picture is obscuring the words, and that's not great. I don't know how I get over that. Well, before we move on any further with open listening, I just want to clarify and underline some of the core principles that apply to open listening, but quite equally apply when we are leading a client through each one of the steps in many ways. It's important to note that I'm not a therapist and this isn't therapy. The client is the healer, not the practitioner. Open listening is focusing on observing those physical signs and signals that we spoke about in the previous slide. It's important the importance of open listening is summed up in the word calibration. Once we have a sense of the signs and signals coming off the client, we are able to then use this as a baseline. Fundamentally, we are observing without judgment, without jumping to conclusions about what the signs and signals mean. The practitioner role is just to observe without interpreting, without judging, without jumping to a conclusion about meaning. They are serving as a witness in that respect, an observer. So put simply, open listening is observing without judgment. It's focusing on what we can see and hear in the client before us. The signs and signals as we observe them are the end products, are the fruits of patterns running in the client's neurology. So, explaining calibration then, it's noting the client's baseline physical responses. It's the way in which we can measure any changes in the client after they have been through the process. Now, it sometimes takes a while for us to get used to this, because as the human animal, being herd animals in terms of our evolutionary history, we've gained a unique skill in being able to pick up on these sensory signs and signals and make a guess about the feelings of those in front of us. Now, as a practitioner, we are slowing down our tendency to make that abstraction. We are using, certainly in our minds, sensory-based language to describe what is being observed, what is being heard. You know, things like subtle changes in complexion and muscle tone. And that's really quite important when it comes to open listening. Now, as part of this process, we are going to use a scaling question. It's important I think anyway, to use the scaling question verbatim. It goes something like this. It's written on the slide there. On a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being neutral and 10 being the most intensely you've experienced this experience, where are you now? See, the scaling question is really used by us to evoke the experience that the client is working with. If the client has already spoken to us about her or his experience, well, it will have been evoked already. In the cases when the client isn't choosing to speak about their experience, this scaling question is our opportunity to evoke this experience, even though the client is accessing the experience lightning quickly. There will still be visible signs and signals coming off the client. And remember, those signs and signals are the fruit of the pattern running. Now, the number itself is less important from our perspective. It means a lot to the client because in order to come up with that number, there is an incredibly complex array of mental processes to arrive at that number. But the number itself is less important to us. It's the observable physical changes that we can see. So some of those signs and signals and changes could be related to skin tone, skin color, muscle tension, posture, hand movements. Nothing is inconsequential. All of it, the model suggests, is the fruit of and the outcome of internal patterns running. This gives us an opportunity to establish a baseline. Again, it's so important that when we're watching and observing, we're not seeking meaning, we're just noticing what is happening. The practitioner's role is to support the client in her journey, not to direct or interpret. Healing comes from within the client, facilitated by her own processes. What we're doing is holding a space for the client to do her work in. Some key takeaways then. Open listening is the foundation of the three-step process. I'm going to be holding webinars over the next few weeks. One on encoding, step 2, and the other on future pacing, step 3. You're very welcome to attend these. You do need to register for them, but that it's no biggie. Also, I'd like to encourage you to get into a habit of looking at people and noticing, calibrating, being aware of, using sensory-based language in your own self-talk, and observe. I believe, and I have some experience and some evidence, that mastering this three-step process can help practitioners empower, if you like, women with effective non-judgmental support. I think it builds deep trust and rapport as we're paying attention to what we're seeing and hearing coming off the client without judgment. There is also an opportunity for you as a practitioner, usually a self-employed practitioner, to enhance your professional reach, standing out, and potentially increasing your revenue by offering this kind of more specialized or unique process to your client group. when you choose to book the training, just some things that I'd like you to be ready for. There is a 20 hours, I'd say up to 20 hours pre-learning requirement. There are 2 live days on Zoom. The groups are quite small, never more than 8. The Zoom times are designed 10 till 3 so that any child dropping off or picking up requirements are kind of settled, met. Also, the training doesn't end with the 2 live days. After the training, there's a 1 hour consolidation video, as well as complete one-to-one support through the accreditation process, should you choose to follow it. Okay, that's me. You can visit the website for more information. Time now for questions.